Good morning, everyone. How are you today?
I love that picture.
Okay, well, anniversaries. I just realized as I was looking at the header of my talk this morning that it's my parents', well, would be my parents' 78th wedding anniversary. And it was the common joke in our family because my parents ran away to Reno, Nevada to get married, which, if you're raised in California, you know is where everybody used to go to get divorced. So they flipped it on its head, and I think that kind of set the tone for the rest of my life, sort of flipping everything on its head. So today's
Oh,
subject is expectation. And it kind of popped into my head because I was listening to the news and everybody was talking about how we expect to go back to normal soon and everything's going to be just the way it was. And I realized thinking about it, expectation is kind of the classic double edged sword, isn't it? On one hand, it is said that expectation, that the road to disappointment is paved with it. And on the other hand, working with spirit is rooted in our expectation that our best possible outcome reveals itself when we believe. We set an expectation, we believe that expectation is our birthright, if you will, and that is how spirit develops our experience. As I said, the news is talking about how people are depressed due to the COVID-19 interrupting their lives last year and then still. And the lives that they expected to live through 2020 just didn't pan out the way they expected it to. And they're all depressed about that. And, COVID has depressed me too. Let's be realistic. I'm depressed by the way its handling has been politicized. I'm depressed by how it was initially mishandled. And I'm depressed by knowing that hundreds of thousands of people around the world have been lost to us really unnecessarily. But what does not depress me is that my expectations of a year ago haven't played out as anticipated. If you'd sat down with me, a year ago, 13 months ago now, and said, hey, what's the next 13 months going to look like? I probably would have laid it out and it would have looked pretty much like the year before that. Well, there was an election in there, and hopefully there would have been some excitement around that. But basically, in my personal life, things wouldn't have changed a whole lot. Some milestones in my daughter's life, that sort of thing. But those things were anticipated. I could see those coming down the road. Well, mental health professionals are suggesting now that we find ways to recenter. And I like that, recentering. It's acknowledging that average has moved, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Uh, I was rereading We Are More by John Bigelow recently, and I saw this quote that says, life seldom meets our expectations, but it always meets our perspective. And I had that on my mind, and I was watching another episode of one of my favorite science fiction shows, Deep Space Nine, the other day, which is a series I highly recommend to anyone on a spiritual journey. The writers are definitely science and mind people, they got to be. But in this particular story, the young child of two of the recurring characters falls through a time warp and then returns from an otherwise uninhabited planet just a few hours later in our perspective, but she's 10 years older and fully grown. And she's been alone for 10 years. So even though her parents speak to her and they show her what should be familiar surroundings of their home and items that she played with as a child, she still doesn't recognize her parents until, by chance, she lowers herself down to the level of a 6-year-old and looks up at them. And suddenly her eyes begin to widen as she realizes she does recognize them. These are the people that she lost 10 years ago. But she couldn't recognize them looking at them eye to eye from a fully grown body. She had to get down and go back to where she had been when she last saw them to recognize them from the perspective of a small child. We seek familiar items to be comfortable. We seek a familiar perspective. When we travel to other countries, our ears perk up when we hear our native language, don't we? Suddenly it's like, oh, wow, there's somebody I can connect with really easily. Or we look for familiar foods on the menu of a restaurant that's new to us. You know, we're a little bit afraid to step out and try something totally unknown. Well, you know, given the culture shock we've all experienced this past year, let me suggest we spend less energy trying to turn back the clock and focus on adjusting our perspectives so we can recognize the good breaking out all around us in the form of new opportunities. Opportunities we might never have recognized had the world not suddenly changed. On the Florida Roundup the other day, on our local NPR radio station here in South Florida, the host was interviewing a successful local restaurant owner. And while no one was sugarcoating the hardships experienced by many through the pandemic, the conversation eventually came around to how many former restaurant employees had simply moved on to other types of work and will not be coming back to the restaurants. Waiters and barbacks and even bartenders that, you know, had been doing it for years and years and years, suddenly they're like, you know, I got this job working at the warehouse and I got medical benefits, and why should I go back? And a former chef actually called into the show and was telling how, you know, he had been in charge of a massive crew at a major hotel in Miami, and, you know, was responsible for everything as the chief chef there, and had this huge staff and all of the logistics of running a massive restaurant in a luxury hotel, and it went away. And he sat around and felt sorry for himself for a little bit, but then he got a job as a baker for one of the local grocery stores here, took a $40,000 cut in pay, and yet now he's happier. They asked him, are you going to go back? Has the hotel called you? And they go, yeah, they've called me. I'm not going back. I had the chance to realize how stressful my success had become, how much it was killing me to be successful in what I did. And now I just go to work and I bake my bread and I talk to the customers, and I don't need the extra 40,000. I'm making enough. And it's okay. So I'm wondering how many people around the world have taken the opportunity to realize that it may not have been as good as we thought it was when it all shut down. Of course we were all scared. Of course we were all shocked when the normal went away. But how many of us had the spiritual connection and the ability to say, okay, what's next? Not how do I get back to where I was, just what's next? You ever watch the action movies with the superheroes when they get into one of their fabulous action scenes, how they jump off of a roof without having any idea what's underneath them? How they just roll into the next event, you know, and there's always something there. Of course, you know, screenwriters help, but there's always an answer to their dilemma. They'll jump off and there'll be a train going by that they land on, or a truck or something, you know, or they'll hit a wire that they can swing off of and go do something else. You know, we cheer for these superheroes, and we wish we could live that way. And yeah, it's dangerous to jump off of roofs. I don't recommend it. But when the building's collapsing around you, why not jump? You know, why not? How bad can it get? You know, so spirit is timeless, and it only knows the present. So, you know, we see the superheroes jumping, they're just like, bad things happening, need to jump off this roof. Not thinking about the future. Just knowing that they've got to be someplace other than where they are right now. So, spirit is like that. It doesn't know the future. It doesn't care about our past. It just is right here and right now. So having expectations is not really a spiritual characteristic. It's not really a spiritual principle other than in our spiritual practice. Let me get into that for a second. Having an expectation is moving out of the present and into an imagined future. So that's kind of the downside. It's taking our present and saying, well, I think this is going to happen, and this is what I expect to happen, so this is how I will conduct myself. And if you're planning for your retirement, that's a good way to be. If you're driving down the road, it's good to anticipate what's going to happen out in front of you. But spirit doesn't work that way. Spirit is simply concerned with what's happening right here, right now. And, we can only imagine our future because even our next breath is not certain. So, we're only imagining what we expect to happen. We can't be guaranteed it's going to happen. And spirit doesn't really care what we think at that point, because it doesn't even have a concept of a future. It's only concerned with what we believe right now. In the words of popular philosophy, we make plans and God laughs. When we set our belief in spirit, we are setting it in the present. All spiritual mind treatment, the affirmative prayer that we practice, is set in the present. We don't wish for anything to happen to us. We know a thing is true about us right here, right now. We do not expect to get well if we are sick. We know our natural state is health. We know that our natural state is health right here, right now, without exception. Our affirmative prayer is to recognize our natural state of health in the current moment. Spirit then works through us to manifest our state of health. Now people say, well, I've got this terrible cold and I did a treatment and I've still got a terrible cold. What's up with that? Well, number one, if you're really, really good at spirit, that cold will go away really quick. I don't know a lot of people that have that experience. I know it's not one that I've seen for myself. But there are people that have miraculous healings. However, spirit will tell me to stay in bed, to take my vitamins, to drink some orange juice or something else. And pretty soon that cold is gone. And then if I continue to make the right choices, it never comes back. How many people have noticed this past year that they haven't been sick at all this year? At all. Why is that? Because you've been wearing a mask and staying socially distant from everyone around you. You haven't been making unnecessary trips to places where people are sick. You've been healthier this year. The rates for the flu have been through the floor this year, because we're doing things differently than we've always done it. And we're getting a benefit from it that we didn't even recognize at first. I have not been worried about catching COVID. Simply not out there thinking every day, oh my God, don't let this happen to me. It's terrible. Yes, it is terrible. It's terrible for those people that have to encounter it, have to deal with it, have to work around people that have it. Our frontline people that are out there, God bless them, the stress that they're under going through this. But personally, I'm like, you know what? I can continue on with my life. I don't have to be near a bunch of people that may or may not be infected. I can do things like wash my hands and wear a mask, and I'm just fine. And Spirit works through me to ensure that I take those steps and remain confident that science will and does uncover the solution that already exists in Spirit. You see, The solution has always been out there. It just took some really talented, dedicated people to put it all together and get it into a bottle so the rest of us could have it. But it was always there. They didn't create new elements. They simply made new combinations of elements that already existed. You know, with literally the entire planet practicing some form of prayer focused on a solution to this pandemic, is it any wonder that Spirit revealed a vaccine in record time? I mean, every single religion has some form of prayer. Even people that don't practice religions practice some form of silent prayer within themselves. And every one of us has been thinking to ourselves, I will be so happy when this is past us. And the universe said, right, let's get past this. Here's some information. Put it to good use. And here we are. I got my second shot 2 days ago. And my wife just got her first shot. And pretty soon our daughter will be able to get hers. I hope a bunch of you have gotten yours. And if you haven't yet, you will soon. It's certainly coming around. And we're going to be out of this. And one day this will just be one of those memories. You know, I kind of kidded with my daughter. I said, you know, you'll have your grandchildren sitting on your knee and go, I remember back in the day when we couldn't go to school in person. We had to go online. And her kids will be out on Pluto someplace on a Zoom meeting going, well, what's strange about that? You know, of course we go to school on Zoom. The teacher's on another planet. You know, what's the big deal? But it'll be her story. You know, so, you know, in The Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes writes ad nauseum about how we should expect our desired results. So expectation comes into play on that side of it. He says so, though, while reminding us that we can only do so by letting go of any beliefs that are stopping us from acquiring our desired result. Yeah, we expect to be healthy, but we got to let go of anything that we secretly harbor. If we secretly harbor a belief that we're not worthy of health, or worthy of happiness, or prosperity, you know, because health is, after all, a form of wealth. Everybody says, well, as long as you got your health, you know, you're okay. Yeah, health is the most important form of wealth. We got to have that up front. But if we don't believe we're worthy of it, or that there's some grand conspiracy that's going to keep us from having it, we're not going to be able to manifest that. You know, so Holmes is reminding us in The Science of Mind that, you know, we've got to expect to be healthy. We've got to expect that is our reality all the time. And Spirit will keep us, you know, on the rails for that. You know, but we cannot remain healthy if we ignore the science that supports being healthy. You know, Holmes writes again, he says, we cannot expect to overeat or eat the wrong things and have them agree with us. But there is an intelligence within us that will guide us into a proper diet. You know, Spirit is that intelligence within us, working through us, being blessed with freedom of choice, though. We can choose to ignore the inner intelligence. But if we do, we get to enjoy the consequences. John Bigelow writes again, he says, expecting, hoping, or demanding someone else take responsibility or deal with the issue or problem is putting the solution out there, which doesn't give us the chance to use our imagination, intelligence, or other such strengths to up our own game. John is reminding us that we create our own reality through our choices. One choice I find helpful is stop overthinking it. Our hearts are an excellent seismograph for measuring truth. When we quiet our minds and listen to our hearts, our good is revealed. We can recognize it by the joy in our hearts. If we are fearful, anxious, or angry, our hearts are heavy, telling us we have strayed from our truth. If we listen. Putting this together, I was reminded of a story I was forced to read in college and somehow never thought I would need it, but it popped back up. The Open Boat by 19th century American author Stephen Crane. It was a story of four men who were caught in a storm. Their boat sank. They got into the dinghy. They were trying to make it to the shore, which wasn't that far away. They could actually see it. But the storm, the sea was so heavy that it flipped the dinghy over, and the men were thrown into the water. And one of the men, we knew it through the story, was this strong, willful person, and he knew how to swim really good, and he was like always in charge of everything. And so he started to swim really hard. He was fighting those waves, fighting them. And the other three really didn't have anything like that going for them, so they just surrendered to the waves. And in the story, they're washed up on the shore alive, and the fourth man, who fought so hard and was so proud, the waves exhausted him, and he drowned. And expecting to be in control of every moment can lead to our exhaustion, and through our exhaustion, our ultimate failure. Expecting to reset the clock and resuming our lives where we left off a year ago is fighting the waves of a stormy sea. Normal is a moving average at best. Evolution does not take a gap year. Whatever we have collectively experienced this past year has moved the needle on our common consciousness. We cannot rewrite the events of 2020 any more than we can change the choices we have made through our lives. It all contributes to who we are today. And it is from who we are today that we continue to evolve. So yes, that happened. Just watch what we do next. Thank you.